All right, good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday noon, yin class. And so we'll be just doing a really balanced, or trying to do a really balanced yin practice that will lengthen and open some of the muscles with some low, slow, deep work. So if you have a moment to do that, go ahead and grab a blanket or a towel works. You want a mat or something you can lie on, maybe a cushion to sit on. And I know that not everybody has the full suite of yoga props at home. If you have blocks, that's nice. If you have a bolster, also nice. But really, anything that is supportive and able to fill spaces works just fine. Rolled up towels, etc. So. I'll give you a moment to get situated. We are starting in our seated position with legs crossed, so you might be able to see that. And we'll just enter into practice with some breath work. Orient the pelvis so that you're on the center of your sitting bones, and support the legs if necessary so you don't feel like you're pulling onto the hips or you're dragging your spine forward and back. And we just release breath and relax our body weight down into the base of the pelvis. Release breath again and soften the center of the rib cage where the heart rests. And maybe one more sigh, softening the throat and the space behind the base of the skull. When you've done all of that, allow your eyes to either close or to just drop down gently 3 or 4 feet in front of you. If your eyes are open, unfocus your gaze. And we return to our breath, just inhaling and exhaling through the nose. And just having that single point of awareness, tracking the breath real time. Feel the fullness of the inhale and the softness of the exhale. And maintain your focus not only on the breath, but on the quality of it. So the continuity, one breath into the next, the smoothness of the breath's texture.
Joyce, I'll be right back. I had my alarm set and I kept hearing something.
No worry. And we're here for a couple minutes, just breathing. Coming to your seat, coming to your practice with a fully engaged awareness and intention. This breath is going to be a nice sustaining force in our long held poses, our longer held poses. And it's going to give us cues about how we're doing. So, in our practice, if you notice that you're unable to sustain this relaxed and even breath, you'll know that maybe it's time to adjust or back out of posture. If you feel like the breath is easy and you're eager for deepening posture, mm, it's also a good way to cue yourself into kind of the evolution of each pose. And finally, it's a great tool for staying present with what you're doing in each moment, real time. In the last couple of moments of breathing here, if you like to add intention for your practice, and it's simply an element of focus beyond the breath and the physical movement, go ahead and gather your intention, establishing it too as a focus for the next hour. In this way, each posture becomes a meditation 2 more rounds of breath in and out. And at the end of that last breath, go ahead and lift your gaze, open your eyes, focus them. And for a moment, I'd like you to put your feet flat onto the ground. So I'm going to move my blanket. Have a little space, actually, kind of a lot of space between your feet. And we're going to do a seated cat cow here. So I always like to hold on to my shins. It's a nice grounding for the shoulders. The next time you take a breath in, move the center of the spine forward and draw the shoulders and hips back, lifting the heart space upward. And then when you exhale, release that, round the ends of the spine forward, moving the middle of your back toward the space behind you. Allow the shoulders to curve, and then do that a couple more times. Inhale. You'll probably notice that as you extend the spine, the hips roll along with the shoulders. Same thing happens when you exhale and flex the spine forward. We are warming up the spine here. Let's do 2 more rounds so that when we begin our first held posture, we don't start with a lot of stiffness or a lot of restriction. After the last rounding forward, simply lift your spine up. Keep a wide stance with the feet, and you might lean back a little bit and let the knees drop to each side, preparing the hips for first posture. Right. So, like most things, easing into the work is less of a shock to the system. When you've rolled the hips a couple of times to each side, and sit up, and we'll come into a butterfly pose. Now, here in butterfly, you can choose to sit up a little higher, especially if the hips are tight. We want to maintain the mobility in your pelvis and in your hips. And if you need to pad underneath your feet, do that. I've got a hard floor, so I'm going to put a blanket there. I'm going to shift my camera so you can see what my feet are doing. The soles of my feet are together. Yeah. And I'm going to bring them, I don't know, about a foot away from my hips. Now, if your knees float high like mine, you can always wedge something underneath. If it's not uncomfortable, you can just let them do that, and that's fine. So, long and upright through the spine, I'd like you to tilt the front of your pelvis forward to the space between your hips. When you've come into the greatest tilt that you can find, now we allow the spine to round, just like a cat stretch. You'll see the top of my head in the screen. When you round forward, no matter where you are, I'd like you to support the weight of your head. Now, I'm able to do this with my fingertips in this posture. If you have a mat or layers of blankets, you could do that as well. And if you're higher, of course, you just put your elbows where it's useful so that you can support your head. So butterfly is also a nice sort of opening move. We have a deep rotation in the hips, those little butterfly wings of your knees opening. That nice forward flexion over the hips along with the curve of the spine, helping to stretch the entire back line of the body. And supporting the head should allow you to sustain the posture for a while here without having a lot of neck irritation. If you're finding that the back of your neck is getting a little tight or a little achy or stiff, you might want to adjust the angle of your head or the height of your support. And periodically, just make small, subtle movements. You've already been in posture for about a minute, and there's no need for you to time how long you're here. But just to let you know that we're going to stay here for a couple minutes more. Breathing, allowing inhale to fill the back body and to spread across the base of the hips. Then as the exhale softens you, you gently allow the weight of your torso and pelvis to stretch forward into the hips. And then without checking out or losing your focus, grow quiet or still inside. Hear the sound of your breath internally, but feel a spaciousness building from the stillness inside, spreading into the space around you. Feel the gentle stretch and release that the breath induces in the back. Feel an easing at the sitting bones and across the articulation of your thighs with your pelvis, allowing circulation into those areas. We have about a half minute more. 2 more rounds of breath. And at the end of your last round of breath out, go ahead and unfurl the spine. Once you're sitting upright, we're going to use the hands to bring the soles of the feet flat to the floor again. Ooh, go slowly because we were in a long held posture. And we return to that kind of wide spacing through the hips and the knees. You can lean back again. We'll do a second round of windshield wiper, dropping the knees in the same direction, side to side a couple of times. Allow a little rolling not only in the hips, but across the back of the pelvis. Okay. And we sit up nice and tall, and we're going to drop the knees to the right. So you might want to adjust your legs or the angle of your legs. I always find it's more sustainable to pull the back leg behind a little bit. And again, I'm turning toward my front leg, my right leg. hmm And if you like, you can adjust the angle of the right foot. So open it up for a little bit, deeper stretch in the inner thigh, or just bring the foot in closer. And usually that can be a nice remedy for cranky knees. All right. So we're sitting up tall. Enough talking. We start from the bottom of the waist and start to turn toward the right. Turning from the bottom of the waist through the bottom of the ribs, slide your left hand to the right thigh and move your right hand back behind you. We're not going to lean into the right hand, but we are using the two hands as kind of a frame to inform the spine of its upright posture. Keep the elbows soft so that the shoulders don't get pushed up into your neck. Nice opening to the right side here. If you like to add a little bit for the left side of the neck, you can tip your right ear down towards your right shoulder top. And you'll feel a little bit of tractioning along the left side of the neck, maybe down over the shoulder top on that side. As you hold twist, try not to overly tense the muscles that surround your waist. You still want breath to be able to move easily through your length. And the more you clamp down on your waist muscles, your obliques, and the muscles around the back, the harder it's going to be to have a more natural style of breath. We do use a little effort to get into posture, of course, but then once we're there, we just kind of settle and release as much of that effort as is reasonable. We have about a half minute more. Twists are usually a shorter held posture. So stay with it over the space of 3 more inhales and exhales. At the end of that last exhale, you're going to bring the head to neutral. So if you've tilted it, go ahead and bring it upright on the top of your spine, and then release the rest of that stretch, returning from rotation. I'd like you to lean off into the right hip and then extend the left leg out in front of you. We're going to take this bent right knee and cross it over the other one. So we've got a half shoelace. So I've got my left leg straight out underneath. My right leg is laterally rotated, and the knees are kind of stacked one on top of the other. So once you've got this, again, it's half shoelace, we're just going to sit up for a moment and let the 2 hips come into balance. We'll take a forward fold in this posture by beginning that tilt of the pelvis again, like we did with butterfly. And then when you're at the limit of your tilt, rounding the spine once more. Now, it could be in this case, your torso will lay down on the front leg and you won't need a lot for your head. Sometimes the knee floats pretty high. You need a little support underneath it, and you're not going to bend so far forward. So, of course, this is a highly individual practice. And your own engagement in the process is going to be a great help in keeping you safe and providing you benefit. Even more than butterfly, this one will get into the back of the hips and sort of the outer hip pocket area. If you spend a lot of time on your feet or you have good leg and hip strength, sometimes those glutes are pretty tight. And so this is a nice one to balance all that tightness and strength with a little bit of flexibility and to keep the hips mobile. That in turn takes some pressure off of the spine. Sitting bones widening, top of the hamstrings beginning to melt a little bit. We have 3 more rounds of breath here, too. At the end of your last round, use your hands to help you and come on up. And then before releasing this position of the legs, I'd like you to put your left hand behind your head. So we're just gently cupping the base of the skull with the left hand. Put your right hand down. If you don't quite reach the floor, you can put a blanket or something underneath. And we're going to turn very slightly to the left. Right? And then start to bend to the right, stretching up underneath the armpit, opening through the side of the ribs. Now here, if you like a little bit more mobility or a little bit more stretch for the neck, you can turn the head upward, allowing the head to slide in your hand and letting the weight of the base of your skull drop back into your fingertips. And I'm not going to lie, you are supporting with your right hand much more than you were in twist. So don't feel like you can't use your right arm for that or like you shouldn't. This is a much shorter posture. In fact, we have only about 30 more seconds. You should feel that whole left side from that outer part of your hip, from your trochanter, all the way up through the side of the body, the armpit opening, the elbow lifting and pressing back. One more inhale and exhale. And then return, supporting with that right hand. Slowly bring the arm down and roll your shoulders a couple of times. We're going to unstack the legs. Use your hand to put the sole of that foot flat on the floor. We'll bend the other knee as well. If you like, you can take another windshield wiper. Why not? We are going to begin that whole little sequence on the other side. So we'll start with that kind of knees dropped off to the side position. When you're ready, this time we let the knees drop off to the left. Adjust the angle at the knees and hips so that it's sustainable. And we have this little spiral that begins in the legs. When both sitting bones are grounded, allow the twist to generate upward and place the right hand on the left leg, the new front leg. Left hand goes behind, and we do use effort here to help with the twist. Once you found the place where you want to work for a little bit, where you want to stay, release as much of that effort as possible and find the breath. When you've settled into posture, decide what you want to do with your head. You can lean that left ear down and stretch the right side of the neck if you like. Make sure that the shoulder doesn't pull up into the neck. And we breathe. Balanced here between the front and the back arms. Breath able to move through your length. And as you hold the twist for the final minute here, maybe return to your intention or to that feeling of still awareness. Sometimes that's referred to as groundedness, and sometimes that feels a little heavy. That stillness is expansive. It relates to your surroundings and really centers you in your environment as well as in your body. 3 more rounds of breath, holding twist. At the end of your 3 breaths, bring the head to a neutral position and release that larger twist. facing front. This time we're going to extend the right leg out in front of us. So you lean a little bit away from it and get that leg stretching forward from the hip. And then we bring the left knee across, holding the outward or lateral rotation and trying to stack the knees, right? We're preparing for a forward fold again, remembering that you can always support, right, that bent knee if you need to. Settle the sitting bones. Super common for the two sides to feel radically different, right? So try to achieve as much balance as you can in your starting position before leaning forward from the hips. As you lean forward from the hips, try not to cheat the balance in the pelvis, well, or in the spine for that matter. When you're in your furthest forward lean, round the spine, you know where this goes, and you support your head. We hang out here for a couple of minutes and let the held posture and the weight of the body work its magic into the back of the hips, the outer part of the hips. Keep that breath steady. And you probably already have good intuition about sharp sensation. If you feel something sharp or numb or hot or cold, don't move quickly away from it, but definitely move away from it. Yeah. We're trying to put beneficial stress into the joints. So, stress in the joints sounds like a bad proposition all the way around, but stress can be beneficial as well as negative. That controlled beneficial stretch in the joints is what allows for the slow, healthy lengthening of the connective tissue as well as the muscle fiber. We have about a minute more. That's it. We'll have a final 3 rounds of breath in this posture. And when you're done with that last round, roll yourself up, stacking your spine into vertical. Keep this weird pretzel position of the legs. Place your right hand at the base of your skull. At the base of your skull, move back into the palm. Left hand down. Turn very slightly to the right, just enough to open the chest and the shoulder and elbow back. And then begin a side bend to the left. Move into it with breath. Often, if we hold the breath as we move into posture, there's a certain quality of stiffness, or it's not quite where we want to be in terms of sustaining. You can turn the head to look upward, right? You can tip the face upward if you like. You want to find that sweet spot where the neck is comfortable as you challenge yourself with this beneficial stretch, beneficial stress into the right side. Only about a minute here, so we're halfway through already. One more round of breath. And then release, slowly coming up. Use your hands to deep pretzel your legs. Oh. And stretch everything out in front of you. I'm going to shift my camera for a moment so you can see my feet, my big feet, with the feet out in front. Point and stretch a couple of times. So you pull your toes away and then you pull them back towards you. And you might find your hips or your body want to travel along, and that's perfectly fine. Let that happen. Then swish side to side. There we go. And finally, shake your feet out. Okay. We're going to change it up completely and move down onto the floor on our belly. So I'll change things around again and lie prone. You're going to want to have, if you have a blanket or extra blocks, you might want to have them up at the top of your at the top of your mat. I'm going to lie down here. Ooh, that should feel like a nice stretch for the front of the hips. And pause for half a moment in belly shavasana. So we've got our head down. Sometimes this is called crocodile pose. And we just feel the long stretch of the body as we take those 3-4 rounds of breath. We want to let the front of the hips open and not be alarmed or surprised by that opening. And then we're going to try and keep the bottom of the hips forward into the mat so the pubic bones are not lifting up. If that means you need to widen your legs a little bit or relax through the front of the hips or the thighs a little bit, right? You do that however you need to do so that your tailbone is comfortable. And then we're going to come up into Sphinx, which we'll hold for a little bit. You're going to place your hands flat and open them apart from each other. And come up toward this position where you're resting on the elbows. Now, the elbows can be directly under your shoulders, right? If that degree of extension is comfortable for you or the right thing for you. Or you can lower it down by sliding the elbows away a little bit. Right. Now, I'm going to give you those two choices with an option later on to come higher, but that will be later on. Now, if you have a blanket or a block and you want to minimize the effort that you're using here to hold extension, you can wedge it under your breastbone or even under the bottom of the ribs. Right. Finally, find an angle at the neck where your head feels more or less comfortable. Sometimes that means tipping the chin down a little. You can rest it in your fingertips here. If you're high enough, sometimes it feels nice to stretch the throat. And the whole point of this one, in addition to opening the front of the hips, is to also open really the top half of your spine in the inner surface. So you'll feel the front of the ribs spreading and maybe a little bit of stretch through the inner part of each vertebral joint. Open widthwise as well. Feel a widening through the shoulder tops, the collarbones. And then we just breathe, holding here. Now, very often, even if you're feeling like you're in a good position through the spine, through the upper body, the hips can be a little reactive, not only to the posture, but even to something as simple as the breath. So make sure you have that slow, even quality to the breath that doesn't cause the muscles of your hips to feel like they have to contribute or tense or resist in any way. And then for the last little while in this posture, you have the option of coming a little higher if that's right for you today. If you're coming up higher, and often this is called seal, can move your arms out to more of a 45-degree angle and begin to press, lifting your elbows as they stretch. Often in a higher posture, it feels better to bring the head up rather than to leave it hang forward, but you get to make that call. Let go of any reactivity in the hips or the low back. Allow the pubic bones to rotate forward so that they remain in contact with the mat, and take 3 more rounds of breath. When you're done with that, very, very slowly lower yourself down, easing toward the ground and removing any props that you might have stuffed underneath you. Go ahead and press back with your hands under the shoulders. And we make a child's pose here. And that can feel really nice after a long period of extension. Your choice, whether you have the knees apart, toes together, or whether you keep together through the knees. In either case, you sink the hips back and let the forehead round toward the mat. Put something under it if your forehead doesn't reach the ground. And if it's comfortable for your shoulders, bring your arms back around you. A nice release for the back after all of that bending in the other direction. With each exhale, with each softening on that breath, feel like you're able to allow the weight of your hips to settle, not necessarily press down or altering the posture significantly, but just feel a settling towards your heels. Feel a softening, not just in front of the chest, over the front of the heart, but in back as well, in the space between the shoulder blades. Like you have a little window there that you can breathe through or see out of. A lot of imagery in yoga in general. Couple more rounds of breath here. And then from child's pose, bring your hands under your shoulders and gently bring yourself up. Now, don't bring yourself all the way up. We are going to pause to do a little bit of a toe stretch. Almost everybody has a love-hate relationship with this thing, but it is good for the bottoms of your feet. So kind of crawl your weight forward a little bit and tuck your toes under. If you have a pillow or extra yoga mat or cushion, you can stick it under your hips. I'm going to give you this view. We are going to gently stretch that joint of the toes with the rest of the foot. Sometimes when that joint is tight, the toes start to claw up and they become less useful, and I don't know, all sorts of reasons why you want to have elastic feet. If your little toes like to scrunch up, you can move them out of the way. And you give the amount of weight to your heels that gives you a stretch, but not misery. Yeah, we're only here for a minute. I usually like to start pretty gently, and then little by little, I can bring my torso up to add a little bit more weight or traction to the stretch. Eventually, you might be able to bring your hands off the ground, or maybe stack the head over the chest over the rest of you, and allow that weight to move into the stretch. Almost done. The nice thing about this one is that when you let it go, it feels really good. Have 2 more rounds of breath, please. When you come out of it, lean yourself forward, put your hands to the ground. And when you've got your weight off of your toes, ooh, just lay your feet down. I like to just kind of jiggle them a little bit. Right? A little shake for the feet feels good. And since we're in hands and knees, we're going to take 3 rounds of cat and cow. So once your feet have stopped barking at you, we start with an exhale this time and round the spine forward. On the inhale, go the other way, extending upward. And 2 more times, just roll through the juiciness of your spine, your shoulders, and your hips. If you like to shift a little forward and back as you do this, why not? One more. And then return from extension and see the space at the front of your mat. We are going to move into a little bit of dragon posture. And so here is where it's nice to have, if not yoga blocks, maybe a little extra layer of blanket or mat at the top so you can, have some height to clear the floor with your foot. And you'll see why. Let me adjust my camera. Okay. So with that little rounding of the spine, we're going to bring the right foot forward. Oh, I made it too high. So right foot is forward, right? And our left foot is back. Okay, we want the front knee stacked over the ankle. And then we're going to move that foot out to the side, still keeping the knee over the ankle, right? Once you're there and you have space to put both hands to the inside, here's where you might want your blanket or something like that. Yeah. So we're going to move the back knee back as well until we have extension in this hip. All right, so we're going to do our little low flying dragon here eventually. Pause for a moment before deciding how deep you want to put this and let the pelvis and shoulders come into balance. When you're ready, you can start to ease forward through the torso. Maybe you lower your elbows to whatever surface you've got. Have a bolster, that works too. And we just hang out here for a little bit. The back toes can be pointed or tucked. You'll see me tucking mine because that just makes my knee feel better. And I just hang out for a little bit. So this is a really, really big ask of the hips. You've got hip flexor here and then back of the hip and thigh here. Make sure here too that you can breathe smoothly, accept a little bit of discomfort so long as it's not the injury style of discomfort. You've got just a little more to go here. Yin is a tremendous balancer for all of the other strength and endurance things we do. Right, that includes walking around, running around, just being busy people. Have a couple more rounds of inhales and exhales, 2 exactly. And then begin to gently bring yourself up. Use your hands. You probably want to get all this stuff out of the way for a little bit. We're going to walk that front leg back in until it lines up with the hip. Now, round the spine like a cat and shift your weight back, pulling up the front toes, and we'll stretch the hamstrings out a little bit. Right, you're probably not going to feel it very much in the glute, but the back of that thigh should be ready for just a little stretch here, sometimes called half split or half Hanumanasana. Right. Now stay here for a couple more rounds of breath. And I'm going to have changed my angle around in space so you can more easily see what I'm doing. Finish that last round of breath. Your right leg is stretched forward. And then we're going to bend it again. So come up enough that you can put the sole of your foot down. You'll shift your weight forward until you've got your knee stacked over your ankle. You arrange your back foot so that you get stretch inside that hip, all right? And then walk your hands up to your front thigh. I know you can't see my head, but you can see the important part. When your hands are up to your front thigh, we're going to take a twist toward that side. I like to prop my elbow there and to anchor my tailbone with my right hand. Yeah. If you turn the left palm up, you'll also be able to open that shoulder a little bit more. So this is an extension, albeit very gently, through the spine. You stay a little bit more. And I'm looking at the screen. I know you can't see my head, but that does tell you the direction of my gaze. I'm looking out, completing the turn. 2 more inhales and exhales. And then release. Start to shift your weight back. And you can either do another round of cat and cow, or you can take it into just a downward dog where you walk a little bit. Little walking feels pretty nice at this point. Pause for a moment. And we're going to lower a little bit to the floor. You can lower all the way if you like. And step the left leg forward. So we start the whole thing on the other side. I like to bring the foot in front just to make sure I've got parallel before wiggling that leg out to the side, opening it, right? This is just good practice for knee safety. All right, when you've got that, you can move the back knee a little bit, allowing the hips to lower and getting a stretch in the front of that hip. Once you've got that, we're ready for dragon. So you find your blanket or whatever and square it off for a moment, making sure that you can breathe. And then as the body starts to accommodate to the posture, if you have the ability to go deeper, why not? You go ahead and explore there. And we just hang out for a little bit. Be careful not to lift the big toe from the mat or roll to the outer edge of the foot. We do still want to keep a full grounding through the foot. As you breathe here, you might occasionally check to make sure that you can still nod and shake, nod yes and shake no. We're almost there. Another minute. Let's do 2 more rounds of breath. And then slowly, with the help of your hands, bring yourself up. Move your prop, if you're using it, out of the way and wiggle that front leg back into line. We're going to take our hamstring stretch on this side. So we start to round the spine, stretching the front leg, pulling the toes up. Stretch for the hamstrings, a little breather before we come into our high flying dragon or our higher dragon with twist. Never hurts every so often to just sigh, releasing the breath, but also releasing tension from the vocal cords, the neck, right? Everywhere, really. Inhale and exhale twice more. And then we begin to shift our weight forward again, placing the foot down. Move back toward the extension of the hip that's behind you and start to bring yourself up. So you're going to lose my head, but trust me, it's still on top. Bring hands up to the thigh and start to turn toward the front leg. I like to prop my opposite elbow and bring the hand behind to just help lengthen and settle the sacrum or the hip. Avoid putting a lot of strain into the neck at this point. So there can be a gentle rotation or turn at the neck, but don't crank on it. Simply allow the chest and the shoulders to be open and the head to rest easily. Lift it over top your spine. About a half minute more. Two more inhales and exhales. At the end of that, gently unwind. Take that front leg back. And either do a final couple rounds of cat and cow or a downward facing dog where you just take a little walk. So we're starting to ramp back down. I don't know if you can describe yin yoga as having a peak or a high point to practice, but that was it. And then lower knees to the mat. And we're going to lie back. So you might want a little pad for under your head. Right. Just want to be comfortable here. So we'll lie down on our backs. And then before going further, we're going to do a couple of things to balance the pelvis. So scoop your knees in and hold your legs side by side, just rocking a little bit in each direction. We're going to take a brief happy baby here with the idea, again, of kind of centering or setting the femurs equally into the hips. So let's flex the feet and open the feet and the knees apart. Now you can hold on to the back of your thighs or calves if reaching your feet is just awkward for you. Or if you can reach your feet, hold the outer blades or the big toes and begin to lift the soles of the feet toward the ceiling. Right. Once you're there, you're going to very gently pull the knees back, sort of towards your armpits or beside your ribs. If your tail lifts a little bit, it's okay, but you don't want it to roll really high off the mat. You just want to feel the lower back dropping down and becoming nice and grounded as the thigh bones, your femur bones, settle into the hips. Here you can close the eyes if you like. It's not a long posture. A lot of the things we're doing now are not only rebalancers, but just a little preface to Shavasana. For the last couple of breaths here, if you like to rock a little side to side, you can do that. Or you can stretch a leg and then the other, right? You can kind of freestyle it a little bit. Eventually, we settle into center and bring the feet and knees together. And with the help of our hands, just guide the legs back down to the mat. We keep it really gentle here. Make sure you don't have a high degree of lift under your head. Plant your feet and we just press up. We press up and hold, and it's kind of like a reverse happy baby, yeah? So now we're lifting the back of the hips and centering, right? The front of the pelvis and thighs are flat with regard to each other. Inner extension. Feel a firmness through the soles of the feet. And then exhale, allow the hips to soften. You can roll back down, hip roll style if you like. When you've done that, we finally come to Shavasana. So lengthen your legs out one at a time. If you have a different preference for how you move into Shavasana, that's fine. Some people like feet together, like a Baddha Konasana. A lot of ways to do this. We do want to rest entirely. So get into that place that lets you breathe easily and rest completely back into the supportive ground. Once you're there, close the eyes. If you're not comfortable closing the eyes, just soften your focus a little bit and feel a pleasant heaviness into the mat, releasing all tension and effort from the body and simply breathing. Feel the muscles around your eyes getting a little softer, the eyes settling more deeply, the skin over your forehead and your cheekbones widening, top and bottom teeth separating from each other as your jaws let go. Breath moving through and across the span of your shoulders, through the depth of your chest, down the sides of the body into any spots of residual tightness. Weight of your legs supported by the ground, hips resting. just a little while longer. And if you like, you can always stay in Shavasana for as long as you want. Um, we are at the end of our hour, though. So if it's time for you to move on, start moving fingers and toes and making subtle movements through the body. We'll eventually come up to sitting and just sit for a moment, allowing yourself to regulate and reorient in space. Breathe in and out deeply, maybe releasing the breath in a sigh. And then sweep the arms up wide, gathering in the breath from the space around you. Inhale, press palms, and exhale. Bring the thumbs down over the forehead, over the lips, over the heart. Very simple. One more breath in and out. Thanks for stopping into class today. Om.